Nothing is outside of you. And that's why we can't evolve anymore through beliefs, concepts, ideologies, roles, and so-called knowledge. For us to experience the unlimited and the divine, one must be in an unlimited and divine state of being. The powers of manifestation that we all have will start to be unlocked in a way that the finite mind can't comprehend when we work with separateness to oneness, as the book lays out. That's why we must go within and do the work and have the tangible experience. And once you have the experience of the self, the outer world changes in direct correlation to what aspect of the self you have come in tangible contact with. That's how we can actually commune and know God specifically and directly.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the RJ Spina channel. And this one, we're going to be going through chapter 2 of Accessing Superconsciousness, RJ's new book that was recently released. I'm joined with RJ. RJ, how's it going, man?
I hope you're prepared, Justin. It's going well. It's going well. I'm looking forward to speaking with you, buddy.
Talk about the suspense build up on that one. We're all very excited. If you guys haven't gotten Access Superconsciousness already, we'll have it linked up in the comment section and the description. I'm personally loving both the physical version of the book as well as the audible version. I mean, RJ, being able to hear the book in your voice, I listen to it all the time in the car. Do you want to speak to, some of the feedback that you've been getting on it first and foremost?
Yeah, I never really even thought about this, Justin. It was through Change Your Mind, because I did not narrate Supercharge, as you know, even though I'm narrating it now on YouTube. So the feedback I got just on Change Your Mind in terms of listening to it and reading, because I narrated it, the effect everyone said was just infinitely more powerful, and the takeaway was so much more listening to it in my voice and reading. So, and I think that's been your experience as well. And a lot of the reviews on Amazon and just the feedback I get from students is that listening to it in my voice and reading, it just goes right through. The impact is far greater. So it seems like a universal feedback. And I think that's the same thing that's happening for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think the beautiful piece is like, RJ, you talked a little bit about like mastering one of these would be much better than, trying to like dabble in any of them. And so I've listened to chapter 1 or chapter 2 in preparation for this interview about 6 or 7 times. So I feel like, I really soak in at this point, right? And so I'm able to pull out some really great questions for the audience. But that's one of the beautiful pieces. Do you want to speak a little bit to that, RJ, about if you're able to even master one of the things in this book?
Yeah, these are, as you know, these are tenets of self-mastery and eternal truths. These are, from my direct experience, these are the supreme teachings. So being able to embody even just one of these 24 teachings is literally life-changing. It's going to take you from the human character to not just your true self, but to your higher self and the higher mind of your higher self. And it's going to move us through this dualistic experience that we have of good, bad, right, wrong, positive, and negative. And it's set up, the teachings, as you know, are set up to actually explore from one end to the other, and then through the teaching itself and the meditation to move right through this experience of duality. So even just one of the 24 is completely and utterly life-changing.
Absolutely. Another thing that I really love about this book, RJ, is the fact that it's the study guide. It's the work that needs to be done, right? I think too many times we watch all these videos on the internet, we get stuck in this like cycle of watching YouTube videos, more information, and we're not actually taking action on anything. And so that's one of my favorite parts is like all of the things in this book with regards to the teachings, the meditations, everything, it's all implementable and it immediately makes your life better, right?
Yeah, this is the difference. Absolutely right, Justin. This is the difference between being a consumer and being a creator. So a lot of us have shifted from consuming, let's say, it used to be maybe media, maybe even mainstream media, and then maybe switch to alternative media. But there's still an element of consuming information rather than having a tangible experience of more of the self. And that's why these books, all the books, are prescriptive. It only matters what the tangible experience is. Information is really useless. It doesn't really change anything. And we're still set up, if we're viewing, constantly watching videos, there's still a reactionary paradigm set up, information, reacting to the information. The key is to embody teachings, to embody more of the self. That's the key. That's actually the evolution. There's no evolution in just taking in information. It doesn't really change anything. But what does change things is when we embody more of the self. And that's what these teachings in this book are designed for. And that's why there's 24 teachings with 24 meditations. So there's a tangible change in someone's life.
Exactly. So, for anybody who's watching this that feels drawn to RJ's work, I would say that the work is right in front of you. Everything that you need is within that book. And, that's the direction you start moving, or else you'll just be a consumer instead of a creator. I love how you say that, RJ. Now, before we jump into, the specific questions from chapter 2, you have a huge event coming up, RJ. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So we are doing a workshop right here in my home state of Arkansas, and it's going to be the Meditation Mastery Workshop. I've never done this. I'm very, very excited to spend essentially 3 days in deep, profound meditation. And we're going to be doing higher consciousness meditations. We're going to be doing healing meditations, group meditations, very specific meditations that aren't even really available anywhere. Some of these things are just what I do and have done privately. And so we're going to be able to do this together. And I think spending 3 days doing this, I mean, these meditations I've been doing forever, and they've completely and utterly changed my life. And I have a feeling the experience for the participants is going to be the same thing, life-changing.
Absolutely. So we'll have that linked in the comment section and the description of this video. Now, I went to the Dallas event. I have never been as deep into meditation as the Dallas event. It was almost, and I can't describe it. Like, obviously, it's indescribable. RJ talks a lot about being in person and how different that is. But I literally went to a different place, and I'm able to like re-access that. So I think we could say one more thing, RJ, before we get into the questions. I mean, some people even said like they've never experienced that and they've been meditating for, 10, 20 years, right? So what's the difference between going and actually doing it in person and experiencing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of things going on there. So one, it's we're able to amplify the energy of an entire group of people that are harnessing the powers of their mind in one single direction. So there's an amplification of the energies. There's also the understanding that the space is being held, very high frequency space. It's held by me, and these meditations, I have mastered these meditations. So to be led and guided in a masterful way while holding a very, very high frequency space, while conjoining our energies, all going in the same direction. It's as you experienced and everyone else. There's apps. This can't be duplicated at home by yourself. It just can't. It is a night and day difference when we do this in person, when we're guided and taught properly, when the space is being held, and there's the amplification of energy. And I seriously, I can't wait to do this, because it was the last workshop that we did that you're talking about. That was one of the more profound experiences that I've had in working with people when we were doing those meditations. And if you remember, there was 5 minutes left of our 3-day workshop, and everyone was like, RJ, we got to do that meditation one more time, please. We know there's only 5 minutes left, but we got to do it. So it really is that impactful. And I hope everyone really listens to what we're talking about. It's something that you'll never experience again. And the only way to get this kind of experience is to be there in person.
And that was after 3 days of RJ, obviously going through everything that we talked about. So it's not like, these people just got there and it's like, let's do it again. It's like the event's over. We've spent 3 days together. It was beautiful. The other thing is everyone was so in sync. It was just, it was absolutely incredible. It was like the closest thing I felt to bliss ever. It was just incredible. So anyway, if you guys are interested, be sure to check it out. Comment section in the description. There are limited seats on the VIP. We didn't even speak really on the VIP, but there's a whole VIP where you get actually closer to RJ and an extra session. So you guys definitely check that out. RJ, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the question. So chapter 2 was all about separateness to oneness. First question for you: why is it important that we lead our lives in oneness, and why is it that we come here to experience separateness as well?
Okay. So why do we come here to experience separateness? I'll answer that part first. So, okay, space creates the concept and therefore the experience of separation through space. And through this separation, we form this understanding of relationships. or the experience of a relationship, which means like subject-object paradigm. So this is really only the lower frequencies of the physical universe can we have that experience. It doesn't really exist where we originate from. The higher self is outside of space-time. Oneness is tangible. There is no such thing as separation. It doesn't exist. So why do we do this? Because it's an incredible experience. That's why we do it, because what we can learn and evolve through having an experience of separateness is immeasurable. It's incalculable. So that's actually why we have the experience. And because, again, we are a projection of our higher self. Where our higher self is, it has no frame of reference, none, of what separateness is. So it wants to experience that, and it projects a piece of itself, you or me, into these lower frequencies of the physical universe. So it's space-time that creates the idea of separateness, and that's through space, and that's how we get a relationship. That's how we get subject-object, and that's how we have this experience. So, and what was the first part of the question, Justin?
Why is it important that we actually return to oneness? How does it benefit our lives?
Okay. Well, too many ways to actually cover, but what I would say is that each one of us is an individualized unit of the totality of all things. Everything is one thing, so everything is actually designed for us to come together. Now, for us to come together, that's the challenge. That's how we evolve and we grow, by having the experience of separateness. So we can actually work with ourselves optimally to then bring ourselves back to what is, which is the oneness of things. And also, just in terms of our life, the oneness, to start to understand that whatever we desire is given, that the one self, me, you, and everyone else, each one self contains everything. There is no separateness. And when we start to understand that the desire and the fulfillment of the desire is actually within us, that oneness, this is when we'll be able to create the life that we know that we're truly capable of, not just with our personal relationships, our business, our friends. The way that we go about our daily life is when we realize the oneness, that we're all an individualized, temporarily individualized unit of oneness, that no one is missing or lacking anything, and that all of your desires, the fulfillment of all of them, are within you. And the only really way to have that tangible experience down here is to go from the separateness, that everything is outside of you, and to realize the oneness of yourself, and then that everyone else is part of that same oneness. They are whole just as you are whole. So it's essential. And I think when we start to master separateness to oneness, I actually think the powers of manifestation that we all have will start to be unlocked in a way that the finite mind can't comprehend when we work with separateness to oneness, as the book lays out.
It feels like when you talk about oneness, RJ, that it would become a lot easier to be detached from outcome. Because when we know that the outcome is already within, when the seed is in the seedling, it just makes detachment so much easier. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's part of what I mean about the manifestation powers. So if we are always focusing on some kind of outcome that we think is outside of ourself, so that's a surefire way to actually not have that manifestation come to fruition, because that's simply a faulty paradigm. That's not true. What we're doing is we're accessing more of the self, the whole, complete, total, perfect fractal of God that we are. And when we realize that the self-healing is within you, your self-mastery is within you, the fulfillment of every desire is within you, you stop looking for a result, and you stop looking for anything outside of yourself. And you realize what we're doing through this separateness to oneness is that we're accessing more of ourself, and then bringing that out into the physical world. So that's really, and that's how healing works, self-mastery works. That's how manifestation works. I mean, there's more to it, but that's the foundational understanding. And separateness to oneness, chapter 2, is really the foundational understanding of just what we're talking about, that it is already within you. And by cleaving away at everything that's in the way, which is really your false character, your ego, mind, identity, by cleaving those aspects away, we start to realize more and more of the self. And that is the fulfillment of our every desire. And that's how you move from, because the ego mind sees everything as compartmentalized, fragmented, and separate. That's how it actually operates, subject-object paradigm. these teachings force you to go before the human character to the self, which gives birth to the human character. And when we realize the oneness within us all, and therefore we start to realize the fulfillment of all of our desires are actually already within us. All we have to do is bring it out.
RJ, don't you say that all these teachings are just a remembering that we already are the embodiment of these teachings?
Yeah, everyone is. We always have been, we are right now, and we forever will be the embodiment of all of these teachings. It's just that our attention has been downstream from where I'm talking about. So our attention has been in personhood, and that is body consciousness. That's the separateness. That is the lack or poverty mentality that everything is outside of you. That is the mentality of fixing, helping, acquiring, and becoming. All of those are false. Life is not weak. It doesn't need help. Life is not broken. It doesn't need fixing. And there's absolutely nothing outside of you. So when we start to work in this way, this is exactly what starts to happen. Separateness to oneness is not a concept. It actually starts to become tangible. And this is actually how we can lead the greatest quality of our life, is by working with that very specific self-mastery tenet.
Absolutely. RJ, if we were able to remember everything before we came here, how would that affect like our experience here? Like there would be no mastery because we already knew everything?
Okay. It kind of, in a way, Justin, it would remove the point of coming here. So the analogy I use is kind of like if you're going to challenge yourself, let's say you have to take a test, right? So there's all this preparation that you have to do in general, right? To be able to take a test and perform well. Well, if someone just gives you the answers, is there any evolution actually happening? Are you learning more about yourself? Are you having to apply yourself? Are you having to apply self-discipline, dedication? Are you doing any of these things? No. So if we remembered everything, we wouldn't take this experience seriously, and then therefore we wouldn't get the most out of it. So there's a reason why we don't remember everything before we get here, because there'd be less evolution. Just like someone just giving you the answers to the test. What did you actually learn? Nothing. Didn't really learn anything. So the point is to map out these unbelievable experiences so we can learn and evolve, and to have then the tangible experience of our intentions. And that's really what this is, the tangible experience of our intentions. Then we also get the challenge of working with ourselves optimally in a very difficult foreign environment, which would be the low frequencies of the physical universe. So we get that challenge as well. So we mapped everything out. The universe is going to open its doors for us because it's lined up that way, because that is our plan. But the key is to work with ourselves optimally once we get here. And if we remembered everything, we would take everything less seriously. We wouldn't push ourselves. We wouldn't get the most out of it. There wouldn't be the richness and the depth of experience if we all just sat back and said, yeah, I already know what's going to happen. So it's by design, and that design is actually done by us.
It's just so funny because like we come here, we forget everything, and then we spend our whole life trying to figure out what's going on, right? And trying to make sense of everything. So, but obviously for good reason, because if you played a video game on the easiest level, it gets boring very quick. So I guess it's, it's that friction and that tension that really creates evolution, right? In the book, RJ, in chapter 2, you said, I speak directly to source God creator, and that is how I have the guidance to share with you. So RJ, what is God like then?
So, yeah, the only way I can describe God, and by the way, book 4, I know we're talking about book 3. Book 4 are some direct interactions with God, source creator. But I would say that when we actually truly, authentically commune with God, the experience, how I describe it, is that God is this vast intelligence that is really beyond comprehension, because God, source creator, is experiencing everything concurrently. So as it's happening, as all life is occurring, that's actually God. God is learning that much. So the intelligence is really not fathomable. And when you actually meet or interact, or there's unification, which is what God consciousness, when there's that unification with God, the intelligence is not comprehensible. Now, what's more interesting than that is that this supreme intelligence, when you meet God, God has the innocence and the playfulness of a child. And as soon as you lose your innocence and playfulness, there's a disconnection, and God, quote unquote, disappears. So to me, that's really the most fascinating thing. And we talk about this self-realization and enlightenment, the purity, right? The cleaving away of the ego mind identity to return to the changeless, the nameless, the formless, the unconditioned fractal of God that we are. And now we can see, in terms of that description of what God is actually like, God actually has the playfulness and the innocence of a child, combined with an intelligence that is literally unfathomable.
I mean, RJ, I love all that. But what color is his robe, though? I think is what we all want to know.
Exactly. Now, he goes through a lot of costume wardrobe changes.
Okay.
He's hard to keep up with. It just depends on his mood.
How big is the cloud that he's floating on?
Well, that too as well. So it just depends. Like, if he wants to impress,
Right.
it just
I love it.
it just depends.
Now, RJ, a lot of people seek God through external means, right? Through religion, through church, prayer, reading the Bible, things of that nature. Now, if God is within our consciousness, how can we experience more of him?
Oh, well, I would say we'd have to remove those things. Those are really downstream and filters, right? So we're often trying to, when this is the ego mind identity, right? Again, being a consumer, reaching outside of itself, which is already a false paradigm. As you just said, God is within our consciousness. God is what gives birth to everything. So to experience God not through those things are downstream. So we really want to go within. And you can think of this again as meditation, right? The self is meditation. And the self with the capital S, that's what God is. That's what it is. So we can't really experience God directly as we tack on these different filters. We're getting further and further downstream. So I'll give an analogy. I love analogies. So let's say I had a crystal, and I can't believe I don't have one. I do. I was going to say, how could I not have a crystal within arm's length? Okay. So let's say I said, Justin, I want you to hold this crystal, and I want you to tell me everything about what this crystal is like, all its different qualities, right? And I go to hand it to you. I said, but first, what I want you to do is I want you to put on 3 pairs of gloves. I want you to put on 3 pairs of gloves, and then I'll hand this to you. Now, your takeaway from what that crystal is going to be like once you're wearing 3 pairs of gloves is going to be wildly inaccurate, because look how much is now between you and God. Right? So the key is to remove everything. And again, this is the understanding of like cleaving away at the ego mind identity, where they're all through all these different beliefs, concepts, ideologies, so-called knowledge, experiences. We have to not go in that direction and go in the other direction. Don't wear any gloves. And then you can have the experience more directly. That's how we can actually commune and know God specifically and directly.
Now, RJ, at the meditation workshop, I mean, you think like through meditation, obviously, you get closer, more communion, right? So I don't know. Could God be experienced in that kind of environment?
Excuse me. Absolutely. In fact, one of the meditations that we're going to do is to literally directly interact with God, source, creator. Absolutely, we're going to do that. And through all my years, lifetimes of doing this kind of work, there's a very specific realm that is reserved just for God. And there's a way to go directly right to that. And we will have, all of us that do this, and we're going to do it, will have direct communion with God.
Wow. Okay. You guys check it out down below. RJ, in the book, you discussed a little bit about what it means to be created in God's image. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah. So, excuse me, just like, what kind of robe Does he wear how long is his white beard? Okay, no. Okay, what it really means to be created in God's image is it's just what we are, as above, so below. So what we are is sentience, right? So sentience is our divine intelligence. What is that? Our divine intelligence is our level of love and wisdom, whose subsets are our talents and abilities. That's the I am, that's sentience, that's the self with the capital S. That's actually what we are. Now, that divine intelligence, that sentience, the I am, has been given a body of energy or an allotment of energy to create with. It needs that energy, or everything would just be inert. Now, excuse me, that body of energy, the allotment of energy that we're given, part of that is this suit, and then our more subtle body of energy, which is what we use to think, to emote, to animate our body, and to make that our body have experiences itself. So it's the body of energy, subtle body of energy. Now, that's exactly what God's source creator is, the exact same thing, just on a much, much, much larger scale. God is a divine intelligence. That's what God is. God is unconditional love and timeless wisdom, whose subsets are talents and abilities. And God, too, has been given an allotment or an amount or a body of energy to create with. And God created the multiverse and everything within the multiversal structure, which includes everything and everyone here except the ascended masters. So to be made in God's image is just that: sentience plus energy. That's what it means to be made in God's image. And that's exactly what we are.
Okay, excellent. RJ, is there a reason why, things aren't more straightforward, right? Like when we look at all these things, like, yeah, you're creating God's image, or like, when Jesus says, be in the world, but not of the world. Like, is there a reason why some of this stuff isn't as direct and that it's more kind of needs to be decoded in a sense?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things going on there. So if we can only understand things at the level that we're at. That's number one. So when we say decoding, so let me give an analogy. I just like giving analogies. Okay, so let's pretend there's a big chalkboard, right? And on that chalkboard is this really long, drawn out equation, letters, numbers, just gigantic. It goes on and on and on and on this chalkboard, right? And then the quote unquote average, even though there's no such thing as average, but the average person looks at this chalkboard, looks at this huge equation, and just goes, just a bunch of letters and numbers. There's nothing there. Squiggly lines, nothing. And then Nikola Tesla walks by, takes a look at it, and goes, "Oh yeah, that's the theory for time travel." So now they didn't see the same thing, but yet the same thing is there. So it has to do with our own level, our own depth, our own sentience, for us to be able to understand things at the level in terms. So when Christ would speak, or Buddha, or Saint Germain, or Yogananda, etc., there's this automatic mistranslation, because we are not experiencing and viewing these teachings at the same level as the person who is giving them or sharing them. So there's automatically a reduction, and so therefore sometimes we're left with the decoding, as you said, because we really don't understand it. Tesla looked at it in 1 second, said that's time travel, but everyone else is like, not really sure what that is. We'll try to figure it out, and so that's kind of what's left. We're left with this trying to figure things out, because we can only understand things at the level that we're at.
Well, RJ, I appreciate you for decoding everything, because it feels like the book is much more straightforward, and we really appreciate that. And I think that's one of the things that you're best at, is taking these complex things like the equation, and then simplifying it to make it more palatable. So, absolutely. So, RJ, in the book, you said, imagine what it would feel like to abandon all personal agendas. Can you tell us why it's important, and how we can lead our life in this way?
Yeah, so that the personal agendas are the agendas born of personhood. And so those are not germane to who and what we really are. So if we can drop our personal agendas, what we're really dropping is the control that our ego mind identity has over us. We're used to acting out at the behest of our programmed mind. So, one way to counter and stop that disharmonious momentum of personhood is to literally, and just try it for a couple of hours or try it for a day, is to drop all personal agendas. Like, just stop and no longer be the puppet that's being puppeteered by the subconscious patterned egoic mind. And so what will remain, or what will come to light or come to life, will be the real you. That'll be the real you. And so by dropping personal agendas, which is the agendas born of personhood, we start to experience who and what we really are. And when we do that, when we do it properly, and the book lays out how to do it properly, we'll start to experience flow state. Now, the I am is the flow. We are the flow. And when you drop the personal agendas, you actually start to experience that, the oneness, the flow, the real you. This is the greatest quality of life in every facet of our existence. So by dropping the personal agenda born of personhood, we will actually, for the first time, be truly alive.
Wow, that sounds exciting. Now, RJ, if I drop all my personal agendas, does that mean that I'm not looking out for my own best interests?
No. Okay. So, yeah, I could see why that would be a question. Okay. Excuse me. So what happens is, so we drop the personal agenda. So we're dropping personhood. Okay. So let's put those two things together. Personal agendas are born of personhood. That is your conditioned, fragmented, subconscious, brainwashed, MK ultra mind. Okay. So if we if we remove that, now what happens is the true self is online. Now that true self is the same self that's within us all. So what starts to happen is that your highest good is served simultaneously and concurrently with everyone else's highest good. They're not separate. So whatever you'll actually start to realize, what is best for this temporarily individualized self is going to be best for all the other temporarily individualized self, because there's the separateness to oneness. We'll actually realize that it's the one self within us all. So everyone, including the self, is going to benefit simultaneously and concurrently.
Okay, excellent. So instead of me doing something for what I think I might gain from it, and instead I just do it because it's who I am, I would then be able to experience the oneness rather than the attachment to outcome.
Yeah. And just be careful with the what I can gain, because
Okay.
we have to start to understand that the poverty mentality is going to take over. And this is one of the big issues with the so-called spiritual community. These people teaching manifestation and manifestation coaches, and they're broke. They don't understand that the I am is infinite abundance. And so this idea of doing things without the conditioned mind, dropping the personal agendas, it's like, let's go to analogy. It's just easier. Breathing, right? Breathing is inhaling and exhaling. It's one thing. Giving and receiving is one thing. It's one thing. So we have to start, and as you know, I teach a revolutionary course in this, which I'm going to be teaching again pretty soon. So once we start to work with this, everything starts to change. We stop seeing things as separate, like inhaling and exhaling. It's one thing. One creates the other. You can't have one without the other. You can't separate giving and receiving, because it's one thing. It's one thing. And when we start to work this way, this is when everything starts to change for people. So that's it. You cease to think what you can gain, because you no longer are separating these things out. As you give, you are receiving. The more you give, the more that you receive. Generosity begets abundance. I mean, this is how this works, as you now know. Generosity begets abundance, and when we start to work with ourselves in this way, our life changes completely.
Right. Anybody suffering with anything manifesting or mentalities or things that have been implanted within you, definitely check out vibration engineering. Absolutely life changing. Now, RJ, we have to talk about something really serious. Okay. In the book, you give your peanut butter cookie analogy. Now, there's no recipe tied to this analogy. And so I just want to know why you're holding back on us with regards to the cookie recipe.
That is an important question. So I would say that what may happen, maybe I'll start doing some baking or cooking videos, because I really do. Myself and Amar, we really like to do that. We love to bake, we love to cook. So maybe what I'll do is I'll reveal the recipe actually in a video as we cook. Maybe that's what we'll do.
I love it. So if you guys like that idea, hit the thumbs up on the video, and comment down below, cook for us, RJ, and then that way, we can kind of gauge the audience for that. Because I'll be honest with you, RJ, I feel like yeah, the book is great and all, but if we don't have that cookie recipe,
There's a feeling of incompleteness. I got you.
Yeah. I knew you were holding something back. I'm just
Yeah.
glad we covered it. So I didn't mean to address you directly on the podcast, but I feel like it was necessary. So,
Yeah.
RJ, in the book, you said this world is projected through you. Everything happens inside of you. Can you kind of dig a little bit deeper and explain that to us?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So this, I'll try not to get too deep about it, but if we, okay. So seeing happens inside of you, right? Touch is happening inside of you. Smell, everything is happening inside. So everything is happening inside. The life force is in and projected outwardly. Everything is happening within us. And this is a fact. It's an illusion that anything is outside of your consciousness. How can you experience anything outside of your consciousness? How is that even possible? It's not. Nothing is outside. Everything is happening within. And the challenge is the illusion that it's happening out there. Nothing is happening out there. I would even say there is no out there. There's only here and now. So when we work going within, we're waking up. When we work trying to change things that are in our physical perception, you have to change the one who's looking at those things in order for those things that you're looking at to change, right? So everything is always an inside job. It's literally projected. It's happening within and projected outwardly. And that's why all shifts that we make are first an inward shift. And then the outside world then reflects that inner shift. It's very simple, but it literally is happening. It's all a dream within our consciousness. It literally is a dream within our consciousness. And the most important thing to realize about a dream is that all you have to do is wake up in the dream and you'll realize that you can do anything.
That was beautiful, RJ. Yeah, it's just hard. Like when you conceptualize and you're like, when you're attached to personhood, right? And you're like attached to the ego mind, you think everything is without whenever everything is within. It's beautiful. I love that. And separateness to oneness will probably bring us closer to really not only just understanding it, but embodying it as well. In the book, RJ, you said the oneness has temporary individuality, but that individuality contains everything. So kind of along the same lines, right? Like everything is within.
Yes. So, okay. So let's go, since you brought it up, let's go to the peanut butter cookie dough analogy.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, and this is one of my favorite things to make. Okay. So you make the batter, right? You get the peanut butter, you got the flour, you got the chocolate, everything, right? Nuts you put in there as well. Okay. And you got this big bowl of cookie dough. Then you get your cookie sheet. First, you start eating the cookie dough raw, right? Okay. But you got this big bowl of cookie dough, and then you get your cookie sheet. So you start taking dollops of the cookie dough and putting it on the cookie sheet, right? Okay. Now, what we'll realize, no matter how hard we try, because I've actually tried doing this, you can't make those dollops that you're taking out, you can't make them equal. Now, you can make them close, but you can't make them the exact same. Some are going to have more peanut butter, some are going to have more chocolate, some are going to have more nuts, etc. Some are going to be a little taller, a little rounder, a little more square, etc., etc. Okay. Now, through that temporary individualization, each one of these cookie doughs, I used to imagine that these dollops would actually eventually become self-aware. They would realize that they are this thing temporarily, and then they would immediately start to compare, say, why do you have more chocolate than me? Why do you have more peanut butter? But the truth of the matter is, two things is that 1 second ago, they were all one. Same with us. And what we're seeing is variance. So in other words, everything here is God, but it's not the same. It's not the same amount or weight of sentience, of love and wisdom, whose subsets are talents and abilities, and also the energy that is given. So it's all God, but it is not the same. It is not the same. The sentience that is you, Justin, is far more than the sentience that is a fern, right? So this is obvious, right? This is obvious. So it's all God, but it is not the same. So when we're able to embrace that, and there's no one better than another, but they're not the same thing. So I think that's the most important thing that we can take away from it. It is all God, but it's various levels of sentience, various different vibrations. And vibration is another word for information. And that information actually is our sentience. And then the amount of energy that we are given is always in direct proportion to the amount of sentience. So the more sentient something is, the more energy it is given, the more powerful that thing is. And if we kind of look at like rocks and minerals, right? They're inert, right? That's because the level of sentience or consciousness, I wouldn't even say that they're sentient yet. The level of consciousness, right, is far less in a rock or a mineral. And that's shown in that they're not given any energy to quote unquote move themselves or animate themselves because they haven't learned how to evolve themselves through creativity. And once consciousness learns how to evolve itself through creativity, that's how sentience or sentient self-aware, and these are the different levels that God decided to create and learn about itself by utilizing all these different levels. But it's all God, but not the same.
So RJ, is everything in like a perpetual cycle of leveling up then with regards to consciousness and then sentience and then?
Yeah, I mean, the only mandate that actually exists is to know thyself and all thy infinite potential. That is the only true mandate of existence itself. Because existence, my understanding is that existence knows less than 1/1000th of 1% of what it actually is. So it's almost nothing. Consciousness or existence itself is just beginning to understand to understand itself. And so, yeah, so there's the cycle of the mandate to keep, I mean, that's what self-realization is, right? To realize the self, right? It's the same thing. Know thyself and all thy infinite potential. So this cyclical nature, it can never really end. It can never really end. And then the question becomes, did it ever really begin in that sense? Has it always been going on? And I would say it has always been going on, but almost at a dormant stage, though. But there was something happening, but it wasn't until existence became self-aware that it could start doing something about understanding itself. But we've just begun this. Now, things like when animals or things become extinct, what that means is that form factor, that body, that form factor is no longer useful for the consciousness inside of it to continue to evolve. So in other words, the consciousness or the sentience inside it has reached a max potential in terms of what it can evolve into while still utilizing that suit. Now, the consciousness that's inside animals that become extinct, the consciousness is going to keep going and keep evolving, and it'll eventually end up projecting itself into some other suit if it's going to keep incarnating within the physical universe, the low frequencies of the physical universe. But it's the suit itself is no longer lending itself. It's no longer useful to the consciousness inside of it understanding more about itself. And that's really why we have things like extinction.
Wow. Super cool. So I might have been a fern a couple million years ago is what you're saying, right, RJ?
I would say, no, you know what? It's okay. Well,
I do have some ferny
yeah,
qualities. Sometimes I'll sway with the breeze a little bit.
yeah, you might have, Justin. Okay, I can see that. No, so okay, so this is from my direct experience. No, okay, so how does that work? Okay, so there's two things going on here. So when God created mini me's of itself, those are our higher selves, and we're a projection of our higher self. So the higher self is kind of like a mini me of God, and just like we are a mini me of our higher self, right? As above, so below. Okay. So as we just talked about, God created through variance. Okay, so there are some higher selves that God created that we'll say are just highly advanced, right? I'm being generic, but just highly advanced. Okay, so that higher self God created and it's highly advanced. Okay, there's nothing that higher self could learn from projecting a piece of itself into a plant or insect. It's too evolved, right? So it's like a PhD in math is not going to learn a lot from doing single digit addition and subtraction problems, right? There's just nothing for that person to learn from that. So as an analogy, it's the same thing. There's nothing that higher self is going to learn. So there are some higher selves that have never uh, projected a piece of itself in order to have an incarnation as a plant, a fern, or whatever. Now there are some that do, that end up evolving outside of that genre and then start evolving itself through projecting piece of itself as an animal. So both things are occurring. Both things are occurring, but some higher selves were already created more evolved and there was nothing for it to learn from that. And some higher selves were created at a certain level and they're having those experiences of being a rock or a mineral, a plant or an insect, then an animal, then a human or alien, and in between the human or alien are the narcissists. So there's those genres. So many of them are on that cycle of doing that. Now, these other higher selves are still on a cycle of their own evolution, but they were created from the beginning point too advanced to learn anything from incarnating as a fern.
Wow. I was certainly not a fern. I'm much smarter than that, and we're evolved. I'm just kidding. um, RJ, so if we're taking it back to separateness to oneness, and we're all the dough on the cookie sheet, right? What does it mean if we dislike people or we don't want to spend time with certain people? Like, and is that something we need to get around? You know what I mean? Like, do we need to work through those things?
Well, no. Okay, so we naturally gravitate. Everything always seeks its own level. Okay, so we tend to gravitate to others, so-called others. There are no others, but we tend to gravitate towards situations and environments, and therefore the other people that are in those situations, environments that are in frequential resonance, right? So that's what I mean about everything seeks its own level. So if we're not vibrating with a certain environment or a certain group of people, it's okay. It's okay that it's not that dislike, and it's just it's not the word. It's not accurate. So it's not dislike. It's just that we're not in resonance, and we seek resonance, right? It's like we want other people to dance to the same song that we're dancing to. Now, if someone else starts blasting some other song, it's so discordant, right? And we lose our flow. We can't be ourselves and we can't flow because there's a whole other frequency, a whole other song playing, and it's not matching up. So it's okay that there's endless variations of songs playing, endless variations of frequencies and all this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't say it's dislike. I would just say it's just not resonance. And if we can start to look at it that way, I think we can remove the judgment born of personhood. I don't like him. I don't like her. Right? No, it's just different. It's just a different part of the whole. Right? Because it's all part of the whole, and therefore nothing special. So that's really what it is, and it's okay not to. We shouldn't say to ourselves, I need to interact with him and her and them and that. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to be yourself. That's really the key. Just like they and everyone else need to be themselves.
Wow. Okay. I love that. Awesome perspective. RJ, this next one isn't even a question. It's just like sometimes like stuff in the book you write is so brilliant. I feel like we need to like shed some light on it. So one of the things that's like really profound is the one who looks through your eyes sees through all eyes. Like that's pretty crazy. Do you ever write anything down, RJ? And you're like, wow, that was it right there. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, like in self mastery, I'll be sharing and the teachings of self mastery are really the book, and there's more that we do in the course. But yeah, sometimes I'll be sharing one of the tenets of self mastery or one of the eternal truths, And because as I'm teaching it or explaining it, whatever, I'm having that experience because I'm connecting obviously with what it is that I'm saying, and then therefore the actual meaning, and then the tangible experience of it. So every now and then, and this happens in class, I'm like, wow. And then I'll, it's kind of like a joke. It's like, wow, I wrote that, but it's still, it's affecting me. It's profoundly affecting me. Yeah. So sometimes absolutely. It's almost like I'm a student at the same time that I'm the teacher.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then the other one was the shortcut for enlightenment, and that is the seer, what is seen, and the act of seeing are all one thing.
Mm.
And so maybe we could talk a little bit about like when you try to conceptualize these things, they like break your brain. You know what I mean? And they're not because they're not meant to, right, RJ?
Yeah. That you can't, so the teachings in this book, the ego mind identity can't have these experiences because the ego mind identity is so tiny and compartmentalized and removed from the source of the oneness of things. It's downstream. It's downstream. And these supreme teachings take us to the oneness, to the one who looks through your eyes is the one who looks through all eyes, takes us to the oneness of everything. So the point of where we're at in terms of our evolutionary cycle at this moment is that we can't evolve ourselves through concepts and beliefs anymore. It doesn't work. And a belief, and they're all beliefs, concepts, ideologies, so-called knowledge, they're all beliefs. And beliefs are just a string of justified thoughts. All of them. Okay. So a belief for me is anything whose landing spot lies outside of the self. I believe in a heaven out there. There is no out there. Everything is within you. And that's why the I am, the self, our consciousness can't evolve anymore through the idea of something that is outside of you. Nothing is outside of you. And that's why we can't evolve anymore through beliefs, concepts, ideologies, roles, and so-called knowledge. It'd be a standstill. It'd be moving furniture around in the same room. And that's why I'm here and I teach these things now. And we start to realize that everything is within, everything must be experiential, because the experiential understanding is the unveiling, tangible unveiling of more of the self and the body-mind integration with more of the self. And that's actually what evolution is. And that only happens through the tangible experience of it, not through mental concepts. We're not our thoughts. So what difference does it make if we understand something mentally? What difference does that make? What's actually happened? Nothing has actually happened. Zero. That's why we must go within and do the work and have the tangible experience. And once you have the experience of the self, the outer world changes in direct correlation to what aspect of the self you have come in tangible contact with.
Right. And one of your shortcuts, RJ, for understanding this is asking yourself, what do I know? Right? Because it's nothing. You know nothing, right? So I always love that one. In the book, RJ, you said everyone talks about the silence of meditation. You can go way past that. You want to hear the angels sing. You want to hear the symphony of existence. RJ, I want to hear all of these things. So can you please tell us how we do that?
Yeah. So you could think of the self or the I am. Again, analogy. You can think of the self or the I am as like one big eyeball with a billion sets of perceptions. Okay. It's more like that. Okay. So when we typically when we meditate, right, we don't hear anything. That's because we're going deeper than body consciousness, right? So we're no longer focusing on what the physical ears are picking up. We're attuning ourself, the body mind, to the I am. Now, the more that we attune our awareness within, as for, and by the self is like a billion sets of perceptions. You will actually begin to hear, but not with your physical ears, because you'll be operating in a much higher frequency. And so you will be able to hear everything is sound. In the beginning was the word, and the word was sound. All form has to do with the vibration, the sound that is being emanating. And that's how form takes its shape, based upon the vibration, which is the information. So it's the vibration, the emanation of the information is how we actually get so-called form. So we can actually hear our true vibration, the true vibration of what is. And the only way to do that when we're incarnate is to do it through meditation. You go way, way, way past silence, way past silence. And that's one of the things that I desire for humanity, is then to actually hear correctly, to actually hear what existence really sounds like, not what it sounds like way, 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 way downstream through body consciousness.
Now, RJ, do you think this is something that we might be able to experience at the workshop?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of what is. It's part of what is. So it's there. It's always there. It doesn't leave. It doesn't just show up. It's always there. It's like, so for us to experience the unlimited and the divine, one must be in an unlimited and divine state of being. And then that oneness will take place. And then we will be able to hear, see, and understand the one true concrete reality. And you can't do that through body consciousness.
Excellent, excellent. RJ, in the book, you said self-mastery is all that matters because you are everything. Now, is there any other way to achieve self-mastery other than through what you've laid out in the book?
Yes, yeah. I would say, okay, I'll give you an example. So I would say Bruce Lee achieved self-mastery through the discipline of martial arts. So there's an example of someone who mastered themselves, not by the 12 tenets of self-mastery, the 12 eternal truths, or all these different meditations, in the book, but through an overwhelming amount of discipline and dedication to one thing. And if you ever listen to interviews, he talks about mastering himself. He doesn't talk about mastering the craft. He talks about mastering himself, but he did it through martial arts. So I would say, absolutely, that's a perfect example. And I'll give another example. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan is the first soul that I communicated with once I started working with myself in my early 20s and consciously connecting rather than it just happening, so to speak, because before it would just happen. This was that I could reverse engineer it and deconstruct it and then replicate it and do it. Stevie Ray Vaughan was the first soul that I contacted with. So I would say Stevie Ray. Anyone who's seen him play guitar, Stevie Ray was mastering himself through the playing of the guitar. So we absolutely can. Those two come to mind. Those two come to mind. I used to watch them a lot when I was much younger, and then communicating with them too, which is really, really interesting. But yes, one can master oneself through completely and utterly dedicating themselves completely and utterly in every way, dedicating themselves to a craft, and one can actually experience self-mastery through that.
Now, RJ, is self-mastery and enlightenment, is that two different things? Like, obviously, could you reach enlightenment through mastering yourself?
Okay, well, for me, they are a little different, and we could just be technical about it. So, enlightenment is self-realization. They're the same thing, to realize the self. Okay, now, true self-realization or authentic self-realization and enlightenment, what it actually is full communion and connectivity with the higher self. That's what self-realization and enlightenment is. Now, someone who's authentically self-realized or enlightened, they would have access to boundless amounts of information, talents, and abilities, because the tentacle has now recommuned with the entire octopus. So an authentically enlightened being is going to be wise, loving, powerful, almost beyond measure. And now we can really start to see how few souls are authentically enlightened or self-realized. Self-mastery, I feel, is a bit different. So self-mastery for me is the total dominion over our body-mind complex, or a body of energy. So total command over it. And I wouldn't necessarily say enlightenment is actually that. they're certainly related. They're certainly related, but are they the same thing? No. So self-mastery to me is complete and utter command over your total complement or body of energy, as well as being able to access energies that have not been assigned to you. So when you can commandeer more energy, so you can think of Moses parting the Red Sea, or Merlin doing magic, or Christ turning water into wine, things of that nature. So that's them commanding even more energy. And so to me, those are aspects of self-mastery and not necessarily aspects of enlightenment.
Okay, excellent. Now, RJ, in the book, you map out where we are frequentially, dimensionally within the multiverse. I hope I'm saying that right. And obviously, we're not going to disclose all that in this video because it is, you expounded well in the book. So if you guys want to check that out, definitely get the book. But it seems like the lower that we go within the multiverse, the more physical things are. And then the higher we go, the less physical things are. And it seems like, as you related in the book, that higher dimensional beings reside, are more powerful. I'm not sure how you would frame it. Reside higher up, frequentially or dimensionally. So is that kind of true? Like the lower you go down, the more tangible things are and physical, and then the higher you go up, maybe the closer you are to God. Or
Yeah. So the if we thought of like the multiversal structure as a high-rise building, with the higher floors being, we'll say, more not desirable, more reflective of self-knowledge. So in order to move up this high rise, this multiversal structure, the key fob is sentience. So for you to move up within the multiversal structure of the higher self, and the higher self is evolving itself and moving up based upon as it evolves, as it becomes more sentient, more wise and loving, and therefore more powerful, it's moving up the high rise. Now, one of the ways the higher self does that is by projecting pieces of itself, you or me, into the lower frequencies of the physical universe. And because it's so challenging here, there's more evolutionary content that can be gained because of the degree of difficulty. And so therefore, as we are learning on its behalf, and the higher self kind of puts itself in stasis, and we are learning on its behalf as this is happening, the higher self is moving up the multiversal structure because it is literally becoming more loving and wise because of the aspects, you or me, that have projected pieces of itself into the lower frequencies of the physical universe where things are essentially challenging. So things are more, the experience of solidity and therefore physicality only occurs in the lower frequencies of the physical universe. And that's because it's just because the energies, again, we're within space-time. And so the energies are heavier and denser and they band together. And so this is part of why we have this physicality or solidity, or the experience of physicality or solidity. But the higher up that we reside frequentially and dimensionally, the only way to reside in the higher frequencies and dimensions is to have the sentience, the level of love and wisdom, match the holistic environment. So we can't operate or stay within an environment that we can't be in harmony with in terms of our consciousness itself. So the higher up in the multiverse, the more loving and wise and powerful. And so that's how the higher self moves up. But we down here, and there's no down, it's all in the same space, it's just different frequencies of energy. The energies here are very slow and dense, and we feel cut off from our natural state of consciousness and then our natural environment, and that's why things are so tough. But there are beings that are here that are supremely, you can think of the ascended masters, there are beings that are here that are supremely evolved, and they're having an experience, all the way down here. But just like them and just like everyone else, no one's from here. We are from our higher self, which resides in much higher dimensions, not just frequencies, higher dimensions than where the physical incarnation takes place.
so then, RJ, through accruing more love and wisdom, we're able to ascend then, right? And is that why we're here, to experience things that would allow us to acquire that?
Well, we choose all experiences in order to learn and evolve. That's what all experiences are actually for, to learn and evolve. That's why we create experiences, to learn and evolve. So the idea is to learn and evolve ourself, the one self within us all, as well as our higher self, by having this experience. It's not to repeat this endlessly 10,000 times, 30,000 times. It's to have this experience, to realize the self-realization, and to not have to have the experience again. That's really the point. And we can do that through authentic self-realization or enlightenment, or we can do it through having so many experiences, so many lifetimes, that there's really nothing left here that higher self could evolve itself from, because it's already had endless experiences. So the idea is to keep further knowing thyself and all thy infinite potential. And one way to do that is to have an experience here and to be able to move through, and that's what this book is for, and all the other books, to move through this dualistic experience of right, wrong, good, bad, right? That's why I talk about greed to generosity, disorder to order, violence to kindness. So we can see the dualistic nature of the experience. We can see both ends through the teaching. And then the meditation gives you the tangible experience of how to move through the whole thing, and therefore have this experience, but be untainted or unscathed from it, but still garner and gain all the evolutionary content.
Excellent. Hard to believe that, we just had to figure this out before we had this book, RJ. You know what I mean? We kind of just connected the dots and the pieces and everything. And that's what I felt like a lot before I found you. I was just like listening to all kind of different things. And so that's why I'm really happy that we kind of have a playbook here, to kind of guide us and help us in that evolution. Towards the back half of chapter 2, RJ, you talked a lot about the Ascended Masters. Now, we're not going to disclose any of the specifics on the Ascended Masters. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, so I highly recommend you guys check it out. But I do have a couple questions with regards to the Ascended Masters. First and foremost, which one of them has the best sense of humor?
I would say the incarnations of Master R seem to have the best sense of humor. And without getting into the specification, the book does, without getting into the specificities of the incarnations of Master R, I would say Master R likes to use humor.
Excellent. If this was an episode of Top Chef, which Ascended Master would have, whose cuisine would reign supreme, RJ?
Okay, so Babaji, Mahavatar Babaji is the teacher of teachers, the most evolved soul that has ever walked this earth. And at some point or another, all the ascended masters have studied with Mahavatar Babaji. So I would say Babaji is the wisest, most loving, most powerful soul that has ever walked this earth and will ever walk this earth. And then there's the various, we won't get into specific, the book does. These ascended masters also have various levels of sentience. It's not a universal, right? Enlightenment is not a universal destination. It has to do with the level of sentience, right? So the ascended masters also have various levels of sentience, but these are supreme beings. And then and the other thing would be that Master R is the manager, for lack of a better word, the manager of the ascended masters. He kind of the great divine director, he's also known as. So he kind of leads the charge and helps formulate the plans for the way that the ascended masters are going to go about being the timeless teachers of humanity that they are. But Babaji is it.
He also makes an excellent chimichurri sauce. Am I right, RJ, or what?
His cuisine would reign supreme without question.
Excellent. Now, typically, RJ, ascended masters aren't recognized as such until after their incarnation, which is something that you stated in the book. Why is this so? Why do so many people fail to realize that they're in the presence of a master until, afterwards? It feels like no one is appreciated until they've passed away, right?
Oh, you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? A lot of truth in that. So I would say for the most part, there's a couple of reasons. One is we talked about this earlier. We can't really understand anything other than at the level that we're at. So masters do keep reincarnating over and over. Contrary to if someone thinks they don't, they do. They keep showing up. But again, we can't really see them for who and what they are because we can only understand things at the level that we're at. So that's number one. Also, because of the way that ascended masters tend to, not always, tend to operate, we kind of would need to sort of step back and then look at their entire body of work over, let's say, a lifetime. And it's through maybe a couple of 100 years, and we look back and we see what that being accomplished, provided, left here, what they were able to do with themselves and information and these kind of things. It's at that point with a little space and a little distance and an entire body of work, we're like, oh, well, that's obviously that was an ascended master. But most of the time, while they're actually working here, we don't recognize them as such. And also, most of the time, an authentic ascended master is not operating at the forefront. Very few have very front-facing lifetimes. So most of them are working behind the scenes, and it's eventually those teachings just wound up spreading, and then we see a larger and larger. I mean, Paramahansa Yogananda is still having a massive, massive effect on our planet and other planets, by the way, but a massive, massive effect on our planet. And he left his body in 1951. And so now he's pretty much universally recognized as an ascended master, which he is. She absolutely is. So we need the body of work. We need a little space. And also we can't really, and the other thing is, the last thing is that we've conceptualized what an ascended master is, right? They should be floating, right? Wearing robes. And sometimes they do, right? But we've conceptualized what they should be or what they are. And those are just thoughts that has nothing to do with what an ascended master is or how they operate. And if we have this huge concept of what they are, we could be talking to one and we wouldn't even be able to recognize it because we just have this concept of what an ascended master should be or what they're like. But you'll know them by their work. That's how you know. If someone is authentically an ascended master, the proof will be in their work. They should be doing, or they will be doing, extraordinary things with themselves. Healing abilities is one of the biggest giveaways, to put themselves back together and these kind of things. Accessing information that is so far, far beyond the intellect. Depending upon the timeline and depending upon what is going on, ascended masters will not make themselves a target. So what does that mean? Okay, so they won't necessarily be walking around levitating. They won't necessarily be teleporting themselves because they would just become a target. So ascended masters will keep online, so to speak. There are certain talents and abilities that are less overt in order to protect themselves so they can have the incarnation that they need and so they don't become a target. And also because some of those talents and abilities that would garner a lot of attention, that is one way to develop personhood or an egoic character based upon all the attention that one could get through doing magic or levitating or whatever. So they will, even though they can do it, they will turn those things off and not do it so they don't draw attention, and therefore also potentially develop an egoic character based upon all the adulation and attention that they would get.
Very interesting. And so, RJ, you said that they take like a back seat with regards to not being as forward facing. So I guess that there's still things that they're able to accomplish here. Just they wouldn't necessarily need to touch as many lives, or
Yeah, that's exactly right. So sometimes we have this concept of an ascended master that everyone on the planet would know of them during the incarnation, right? That almost never, ever, ever happens. And it's a little different now with the population that we have on the planet. So I can tell you that way back in Lemuria and Atlantis, and there were multiple ascended masters typically incarnated at the same time. Those ascended masters would speak to the entire world. That absolutely took place, 100%. So now it would be a little difficult because what connects us would be our telepathic powers, but those are turned off because we rely on technology too much. But So for us, it would be the internet. So a real master who's on the internet, would they would not get promoted. So in other words, they are most likely not supported by the algorithm. So it would be the opposite. So they wouldn't have 40 million followers, and they wouldn't their message and their vibration would not be emanating the entire internet, because they are a destroyer of the matrix. They are a creator of a new civilization. So they would be shadow banned. They would be not promoted. The algorithm would not support them. So there's various reasons why, but they don't have to be at the forefront. Their mere presence here changes everything.
They're a lighthouse, right, RJ? Anyway, we spoke about that on the last interview, and that was really powerful. So anyway, if you guys haven't checked out that interview, be sure to go check it out. 2 more questions for you, RJ. Ascended masters, you said this in the book, have a high frequency bubble that they build around themselves while they're incarnate. I believe you said it was a Merkaba. Is that something that anyone can do, or is it not necessary for anyone to do?
Well, through practice, I mean, like anything else, we get good at what we do repetitively. So through practice, we could do this. Now they do it because it's the best way that they can maintain their normal level of functionality, is by creating a very an environment, literally an environment around them that's a very high frequency bubble, so they can continue to operate in a high frequency way. So the example we could use is like a spaceship. So aliens, traversing back and forth. Inside the spaceship is going to be an environment that's conducive to them operating normally, right? So whatever that environment is for them, that's normal. The spaceship will have that environment so they can operate normally. So an ascended master, when they incarnate into the lower frequency of the physical universe, they will literally build I call it a Vimana. People can look that up if you want, but you can think of a Merkaba. They would literally build that spaceship around them made of just pure energy. And so that way they can stay within a very, very high frequency environment, so they can operate in a very, very high frequency way because of this Merkaba or the Vimana that they built around themselves, and therefore not succumb to the low frequencies of the physical universe. So it's like they're in this high frequency bubble because they're high frequency beings, and that way they can operate in a low frequency in a high frequency way by having that bubble around them.
Got you. So if we're going to talk about analogies, I know you love analogies, RJ. Kind of like how Sandy in SpongeBob was able to survive under the sea because she had the bubble of right, RJ?
I'm not that familiar, or as familiar as you are, with SpongeBob. So
she was a squirrel that lived underneath the sea, though, and she had a bubble which basically allowed her to get oxygen. But yeah,
that sounds right. That's no, but yeah, the bubble, the protective. So think of a diving bell for a deep sea diver, right? So that pressure of that water, they would just get crushed, right? They wouldn't even be able to live, let alone function, right? So they encapsulate themselves in that diving bell, and then they could operate how they normally do on land, how they normally do. They can operate that way and still be, just numbers, 2,000 feet under the water, or within the water, or whatever the number is. But they can now operate normally. So it's, it could very well be that squirrel that you're talking about. But a diving bell is another very human analogy that we can think of. Yeah.
RJ, you specifically told me that watching SpongeBob was necessary for enlightenment, so that's why I'm just kidding.
That's something I would say. So yeah, I believed you for a second there. Yeah.
Last question for you, RJ. You talk a lot about the OG Ascended Masters. Does that mean that there are new Ascended Masters that?
Yeah. So okay. So Ascended and again, chapter 2 is the real reference point to go to in the book. The old school OGs, the old school Ascended Masters, there's 13 of them. And so it's the 12 Elohim, our God being one of the Elohim, and then there's 11 other gods, and then there's what created the gods, which is what the Hindu masters call the Absolute, or the All There Is. And Paramahansa Yogananda is from the Absolute, or All There Is, and the Ascended Masters are from these other 12 Elohim, including our God. So there are 13 original OGs, from each one of the gods and the absolute, or all there is, and each one comes from a different god. But there are also, I mean, the number I get is somewhere like around 36 to 40. There are some other ascended masters that have evolved themselves through, I'll say through the evolutionary process of incarnation. So in other words, they didn't start out that way. So I would offer up that these old school ascended masters were already that evolved. They were already created with a supreme level of sentience, love, and wisdom, whose subsets are talents and abilities. And then they learned how to hone that and utilize that through incarnations, through human and alien incarnations. But they were already created from the get-go at that level. So there's probably another three, yeah, it's about 40 is what it feels like to me. So there's about 40 other beings besides those 13 that through incarnation, numerous incarnations, they have mastered themselves and become an ascended master. So I would not just consider them old school, which doesn't matter, but I just wouldn't consider them old school ascended masters. These are ones that have done it through the process of incarnation and evolving themselves. But it is also a bit of a misnomer when we say ascended. The last interview that I did with George on Coast to Coast, someone called up, not with a question, just to say, well, ascended masters don't incarnate. They don't ever incarnate. They're ascended. They don't ever come here, this and that. And so I took the liberty of stating what my direct experience is in regards to that even though their label is ascended, but they continually incarnate here. They continually incarnate here and other systems of worlds. So they are ascended. They don't need to. It is not required for their evolution. They never needed to for their own evolution, but they choose to do so because it is a way that they can be of service. So there's kind of those old school ones, and those are the ones that I really talk about in the book. Those are the true timeless teachers of humanity. And then there's another roughly 40 beings that have become an ascended master. And those ascended masters also choose. They're like the ultimate free agents. They come and go as they please. They have evolved themselves to the point that they're outside of the evolutionary cycle through incarnation. So they simply do so as a way to be of service. And so there's those two different categories, the OGs and the ones that have done it in this sense more recently through incarnations.
Excellent. That was chapter 2. Obviously, you guys grab it so that way you can get the meditation that's in there, go deeper within the ascended masters. But RJ, anything else we want to close out with regards to separateness to oneness?
I just want everyone to understand that the oneness is within us all. So when we think of a hologram, okay, so we have a hologram, and if you cut a tiny little piece of the corner of the hologram and then you shine light through it, the entire hologram opens up even within that tiny piece. So the all is in the one and the one is in the all. Now that's literally how things are. So we are temporarily individualized oneness. So there's the oneness, the totality of RJ. There's the oneness, the totality of Justin. We are whole and complete as we are. No one is lacking anything. And when we start to recognize that that's the same for everyone, we'll start to move quickly from separateness to oneness, because these are all various aspects of the complete totality of oneness. So I know the ego mind is going to have trouble with that, but I'm not here for your ego mind. I'm here for your liberation from the ego mind. And the only way to be liberated from the ego mind is to have the tangible experience of what I'm talking about, not to just mentally understand what I'm talking about, but to actually tangibly recognize it within you. And that's what this book is for. And that's what those meditations and exercises are for.
Excellent. RJ, thank you so much for this book and for everything else. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I love talking to you, Justin. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, RJ.